With GameStop being in the news lately, it kind of made me think about something. GameStop's kind of always been there for me. And I'm assuming it's been there for you guys. I don't mean emotionally, I mean it's just always physically been there. And as much as it may be in the news for being on its way out, I have a lot of fond, even cozy memories, smelling the fresh air of cigarette smoke, being entrapped in game cases, or the fresh crack of a Monster Energy, or a great smell that I like to call body odor. So this is gonna be like a cozier video, you know? I guess you could just go ahead and crack open a nice cup of warm milk and make sure those Tootsies are warm, because we're gonna go back in time to the Dark Ages. I think the best place to start would have to be with the first big boy console, and that would be the Atari. The year's 1977, Star Wars has just come out. Star Wars is on this very system. It's on the Atari 2600. It's quite the time. It's quite the time to be alive. I don't know firsthand, but I've seen Stranger Things, so I know a little bit. Anyways, the Atari 2600 comes out, and people kind of go nuts. It's a big hit. And there's a few bumps in the road, but it's the console. It's the console, the second generation. And it sells pretty well for being the first dedicated video game system with a library of games. But we don't really care about how it sold. We care about who sold it, right? Like, what store sold video game consoles in the late 70s, early 80s? And the question is not who sold it, but who didn't. And it's a trick question. I got you there. And I'm an asshole. But no, it was true. Everyone was selling Atari. If you weren't selling Atari, you were the odd one out. You were the one that people were like, why aren't they selling Atari? JCPenney, Kohl's, Kmart, Toys R Us, Kroger, your local supermarket, gas stations, drugstores would sell these things. Places I'd never heard of in my life. It's fascinating, but it was such a wide phenomenon, selling video games in the late 70s. Sears, of all stores, had an order to release their own exclusive Atari. And it was a partnership with this company called Telegames. And so they were ahead of the game. They had their own partnership. They were ahead of the game for the first generation of consoles, which we're not talking about because it was kind of a quick phase, but Pong. And I just find that to be nuts, because Sears nowadays is going out of business. They're not the cutting edge. They're struggling to stay afloat, but they were the cutting edge back in the day. It's almost like they were early, like they were too early. They didn't know what they had. A lot of people didn't know what they had. They just, bought in and then shipped out once things started to get a little weird. And the way games would be distributed would stay relatively the same until the video game crash of 1983. And the ushering in of a new era in gaming and the selling of games. The video game crash of 1983, in short, was a period of time where there were just too many shit games. And too many shit consoles, and people were tired of it. So tired of it that it took a $3.2 billion industry and shrunk that down to just a minute $100 million. From the years of 1983 to 1985, the term video game was taboo in America to an extent. And so at the end of this time period around 1985, what brought the end of the time period, not just a natural end, was a little company by the name of Nintendo. Nintendo was having massive success in Japan regarding their family computer, or their Famicom, the Nintendo Famicom. And so they really wanted to translate that over to the United States market, but at the time, the US was a dead space for video games. But yeah, US retailers did not want anything to do with video games. Nintendo had to promise like a no-risk proposition, essentially meaning that if their system didn't sell in their store, that Nintendo would take all of the cost. Of the shipments and all of the product, and Nintendo had to go leaps and bounds just to get into the store by saying nothing along the lines of video games. They talked more about the Zapper gun. They talked more about the Rob, the Rob robot. I don't even know what the fuck that is. I've seen it, but I don't know how it works. I've heard it works with a game called Gyromite. I've seen that in stores, but never bought it because I thought that I needed Rob, and I might still. I don't know. But it was interesting. It was a cool thing, I guess. So through this method, Nintendo was able to get their foot in the door. And the rest was history, right? Blah, 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 Nintendo was successful. And it actually wasn't for his first year. In 1985, Nintendo only sold about half of the amount that they produced in the US, about 50,000 out of the 100,000 that they had manufactured. It wasn't successful, but it was enough for other retailers to see that there was still a market for something like this. And so Nintendo then, next year, would go on to become one of the... it would go on to resurrect the video game industry in America. So in this period of time, from 1983 to 1985, a small software company by the name of Babbage's, which I just keep thinking of big cabbages or bags or bags on bags or babies. I don't know. But supposedly it's named after this guy named Charles Babbage, who was considered to be the father of computing by some. It was also invested in by this guy, Ross Perot, who ran for president later on in his life and lost. But then Babbage's had become heavily involved in selling Atari 2600 games, right? And then eventually, more importantly, around 1987, the Nintendo Entertainment System, which was the system that graced the market and saved the day from the video game winter of the early 80s. Babbage's would shift from their stock being like general software and just a little bit of video games on the side to being something that was majority video games. They would focus on video games. And so as a result, they started to kind of get this snowball effect where they absorbed all of their little rivals, hoping that the next generation of consoles would save them, and then they would fail, and so then Babbage's would pick them up, and they'd start to become bigger and bigger in the 90s. And then around the turn of the century, Babbage's, now known as Babbage's Etc., having acquired a company called Software Etc., would be then acquired by Barnes & Noble booksellers. I never knew that they were at all involved in the video game industry, but around the turn of the century, around 2000, Barnes & Noble was buying up all these video game companies. One of them being Funko Land, another being Babbage's, and these were all competitors to each other at the time, and Barnes & Noble might have seen this opportunity a little bit too early again. This conglomerate of these video game businesses would then be renamed GameStop in 2002. So if you think about it, GameStop, in a sense, has always been there from like 1984. And while it wasn't the giant that it is today or was in the 2000s, GameStop was there from really the first major home console, the NES. Now the Atari was a major console, but the NES really was the spark that showed that video game consoles were the next big thing. And so GameStop has always been there. They were a couple years late in making it like a mass thing to be a video game company, or a video game store rather. But it's crazy to think about that there really wasn't that much before. That little talk about how there was Sears, all these retail stores that would sell them, how it was like a power vacuum where nobody really had power and everybody was just kind of like, in on it. That was it. That was the small period of time that GameStop wasn't a thing. And again, the names are different, but Babbage's came in really fast. It was surprising. Anyways, like I said, the rest is history. GameStop is now the giant in the video game industry, and it will never change. It'll always be the best. Nah, I'm kidding, but GameStop about to die. To wrap up this story, GameStop, beloved as it was, and it's not beloved by everybody. A lot of people hate the trade-in policy, and for good reason. I never traded anything in because I just never sold games. And even if I wanted to, I would always forget because I was like a dumb shit kid, and I would always forget to bring games. Anyways, while I love physical hard copies, and will always prefer them, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that do, the market for video games has shifted to online stores. People want things instantly now. It's why Amazon is testing out one-day shipping, like at the cost of sucking out their workers' souls like fucking Dementors. But poor working conditions that focused on individual employee performance, forcing employees to sell rewards, and making both them and the customer uncomfortable, and just mismanagement kind of led to the demise of GameStop. And now we haven't actually gotten to the end yet. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the coming years. But just a lot has led to this business not being as remarkable as it was in the 2000s. If anything, this pandemic has showed exactly why GameStop will be irrelevant in the future, as much as I hate to say it. And it's not because I like GameStop as a company, nor their practices, but there's not another company that is ready to take that place. Best Buy is not GameStop. Walmart, all these companies will not be, there will not be a company to replace it. GameStop is the last stand for selling physical hard copies. You have your mom and pop retro game stores, which are fantastic, and I hope that GameStop takes a look at those because those are really where it's at. And while it's kind of difficult to replicate the magic of those retro gaming stores, it's what GameStop needs to try to move towards. And they have been trying to do so. They've been testing out retro vintage style GameStops. I think it's called GameStop Vintage. But I just don't think they're rolling it out fast enough, and this pandemic hasn't helped. And it's uncertain whether or not that will be the savior. Next-gen consoles still do take discs, so GameStop still has a bit of life support. But you're seeing it. You're seeing the change in the market with the fact that the PS5 has a cheaper version that does not take discs. It only downloads from the online store. There are some that are clamoring for the demise of this company, but like I said, with the likelihood of nothing taking its place, I would rather have GameStop. I would rather have the option to go in. It's just, there's something that's always been special to me about it. There's always just been, despite going in and being disappointed so many times, I always go back. It's just something about it that is irreplaceable to me. So support your local game stores. Those things are freaking amazing. It's like magical, and my hope is that GameStop does figure it out before it's too late. Well, this is sad. This was a sad one, kind of. It kind of turned, like I said, there wasn't a lot to talk about when it came to the game stores before GameStop, because GameStop's always been around. And I sound like a broken record, so it's late. It's already light outside. I'm gonna dream of a time where dog shit t-shirts and plushies didn't take up more room than the Xbox 360 section. So, thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe if you want to get more videos of that. And I will, don't look at my ass. I will see you guys later. Take care, guys. Take care.